Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland. In the last part we started off the game and now we're in World 3 Butter Building, which is absolutely one of my favorite themes in the Kirby series. I think comparatively out of like the Kirby's Adventure music, it's generally one of the ones that's more remixed, and I'm very glad about that because I love this track. Now, the thing is about World 3 is that it's where we're going to start having some extra elements added. I actually mistakenly stated that a certain element would be added in World 2 last part, but I was actually thinking in World 3. I think my mentality was maybe thinking maybe Part 2, but And there's that element right there, a switch. Within certain levels, there are switches like that that we need to press if we want to get 100%. You don't need to press them to beat the game, but if you want to get a 100% rating on your save file, you need to do that. Generally speaking, they are gotten through finding secret doors. For instance, I didn't know this was down here when I was a kid because I didn't want to fall down. Upon pressing a switch within a level, we'll get a brief flash to the overworld, which shows us another piece of the environment being revealed. In this case, it's a mid-boss arena. And upon doing that, you also get a health restore, which is pretty nice. Notable, you can tell what stages have switches you haven't pressed them in based on the color of the door after beating the level. When you beat a level normally, as you'll see here, the colors on the door inverts to a red star on a yellow door. If there's a switch in a level you haven't pressed yet, it will stay red door with yellow star. So if you keep that in mind, it's actually pretty easy to figure out which levels have switches in them. And at the end of the day, the Kirby series prior to maybe Adventures in Return to Dreamland didn't really have that many alternate pathways for you to go along in levels, and they still don't really. So you don't need to worry too much about having trouble finding them. There's only maybe one case I can think of where it's kind of obtusely hidden, and that's just because of some graphic stuff. The wheelie mini-boss is actually kind of annoying when it comes to fighting it powerless, because sometimes it can just take a really, really long time between it sprouting out the little wheelie guy. And there goes the shortcut through this portion of the level. You're supposed to use the wheel ability to fly from platform to platform, more or less, in that little opening section. I think. The thing I like about this game is that the level design actually keeps in mind certain powers if you're... well, first off, if it's the first time you get the power, they use it as a good tutorial for level design. But also, they just have some rooms where powers are definitively more useful than others. Or some powers more definitively useful than others, rather. Beam is an ability I honestly think got better as the series went on, because the very limited range of the beam in this game is just not too useful as a weapon. Now, compared to that to the cutter, which can go forward and then backwards, you can even jump over it, I believe, in this game. And the sword, it's pretty notable which melee weapons are better. My general mentality, really, with Kirby power-ups is my favorites are the ones that can attack while you're still moving. So stuff like wheel, sword, certainly we have one we haven't seen yet, so on and so forth. Burning as well. What was the one in All Star Allies that I really like? Because I don't own Star Allies, but I played it with my friend Jordan at one point. I think I joined in like the last third and beat the game, so I at least learned the mechanics quickly. By the way, you don't need to fight that wheel mini-boss because there's a wheel enemy right here. So if you want to get the wheel, you can just do it there. And that is going to be pretty useful for an upcoming sub-boss. Also, I will take that Maximato. That sounds delicious. Either way, through this door awaits our next sub-boss type. This is, I think this one's name is Bugsy. Bugsy likes to charge directly at you, hitting the wall and bouncing backwards. Well, if he hits the wall to begin with. When he's not doing that, he likes to fly around, just try to fly into you, and his last attack is to summon two little bug buddies, who are the ones you're going to want to sit back at him in the case you want to damage him. As you can see, the wheel is very good at getting some quick damage in, because if you just reverse direction while you're in the middle of the sprite, you're likely to get another hit in. Just make sure you don't stay in the enemy sprite too long before their hitbox respawns, and that was just bad luck. This is probably the mini-boss I had the most trouble with when I was young, just because compared to some other ones, he has less times where you can damage him outright. But for beating him, we get the backdrop, or usually named suplex ability. You suplex enemies, it's pretty simple. There is a different arc if you suplex the enemy in air, though, because you just throw them straight downwards. this is a very selective power-up. In fact, I want to say maybe beyond UFO, it might be the rarest one in the game, just encountering it naturally. Actually, no, I think there's one other exception to that. There's one more I forgot about for a second. Alright, Butter Building 3. Which one's this? Okay, it's this one. Now, something you're not going to get a chance to see this much in this game is the pause screen. And the cool thing about that is that every power-up, including not having one, has a different description on the pause screen. The reason you don't see it too much in this LP is because, well, I don't have many reasons to pause. Although you will see occasional minor jump cuts in the footage. It's mostly notable to the music, probably. That's because I do have notes for this game, namely in regards to where switches are on levels, and sometimes I forget which switches levels have switches. Like, for instance, I think the description for not having a power-up is swallow your enemies and duck to copy their moves, experiment by swallowing different kinds of enemies, I think? Oh, that's just tragic. Well, at least I'm net zero. I'll be going more over the descriptions, and I'll probably find like a full-out list of them as we go through the game, because some of them are pretty humorous, but on the most part, they're just there to tell you what the power-up does. Like, one I think I've seen a good amount throughout my life is the wheel one, which is, I think, I ride like the wind, fast, too fast? Sounds about right. I'll probably get a list up in between parts and go over the ones you've seen thus far, because we haven't seen every power-up yet. We've seen most of them, though. I think. Alright, let's see what the museum for this place has going on. High jump. Alright. That is actually going to be a very useful museum for me, because high jump, I don't find too useful for level navigation, but I do have some uses for it later on all the same. And away we go. I always love how roughly Kirby gets tossed around by a warp star. I mean, mind you, it's like the guy's like not even a foot tall and probably weighs next to nothing, so any kind of momentum would send him flying. The Meta Knight boss mini-bosses, they don't really get much variances. I think some of them might add new enemies later on. Like, I think this one adds in that little flying enemy we saw earlier, I think. But for the most part, the strategies never change, which kind of disappointing that they're not like actual full-out mini-bosses instead of just enemy rushes. But that's something that the Kirby series will get better about as the series went on. I'm thinking of Squeak Squad in particular, which is a really good one. But for right now, it's an NES game. I can understand just trying to have mook rushes instead of unique boss fights. Cartridge space is probably pretty tight, too. Alright, that right there is our next minigame type. This is Quick Draw. Whenever you see an exclamation point, you need to press the A button. Essentially, it's a game of reactions. How much you win is determined by the number on the bottom right when you press the A button. I think that's tenths of a second, not tenths of a second, hundredths of a second, roughly. Each level of the minigame, because the minigames in this game do have difficulty levels, I think it's 1 through 3, have varying numbers you need to beat, because every enemy within a certain level of, it's like Quick Draw, will always draw at the exact same point. For instance, in level 1 here, I think Waddle Doo waits until 82 hundredths, Wheelie at 50, Chef Kawasaki at 24, DDD at 17, and Meta Knight at 14. You can see the issue here. I have trouble ever drawing below a mark of 14. I think I did it in this exact version of the game. I think I got a 13, but Meta Knight's usually the farthest I can make it. I think I've only beaten this specific version of Meta Knight twice. As you can see, I'm pretty decent at getting redraws against him, though. The times only get stricter as you go down the line in any specific level, as well as every specific level. For instance, in level 2 later on, Waddle Doo has a time of 63 instead of 82, and it gets tighter and tighter, and level 3 in particular is damn near perfection level. I'll take the sword. Something I like about the Kirby game that it does the Kirby games that it does pretty well is that for the most part, every power-up has 2 or 3 enemies that can give it to you. Like in this game in particular, I can think of the 2 different varieties of knights, who I'll always recall mostly from the cartoon, because I did watch a lot of Kirby Right Back at You back in the day, and that game is specifically, that anime is specifically based off of this particular game. Also, that was bonkers. He's a mini-boss that gives us the hammer ability, which is very similar to sword. In fact, it's basically the exact same thing, only it's a bit slower, but it has a bit more power. Plus, it can knock down pegs like that. Pegs like that can be destroyed by 2 power-ups in this game, I believe. Hammer and stone. And you need to hit them to trigger certain explosive blocks to go off and allow you access to certain pathways. Bonkers is actually one of the easier mini-bosses in the game, though, because he constantly runs back and forth and has quite a few attacks that cause stars to erupt from his hammer, which you need in order to damage him in case you have no power-up. He can also, I think, just throw coconuts, or is that later games he can do that in? Either way, very easy. I don't know how I avoided getting damaged there. In fact, I've been able to do that throughout my life pretty consistently. There's times where I swear I should get hit by a crash enemy, but I just don't for some reason. And I can't exactly tell what I'm doing right or wrong. Similar to the previous games, I know I mentioned last part that Gordos are still invincible, but as are the Shotzos, I believe they're called, the cannons. I don't think there's ever been a game where you can take out either of those 2 enemies, actually, aside from maybe that weird puzzle game. I think it was a puzzle game. I'm not thinking of Mass Attack. It was the other one. Mass Attack was basically Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2 clone, if I recall, even. Oh, God. This, I think, was the level I found my first switch in when I first played the game, just because, comparatively, these blocks are some of the more obvious side paths. Just make sure to be quick, otherwise you might get locked out. Seeing the level select, though, something I've never been too sure about compared to the later games in the series is what kind of level select I prefer in Kirby. Because a lot of games take this kind of method where you're in a giant little themed overworld that has levels within it, but some games opt for a more map-based level select, and I like that too. Also, this is the light ability. It's only used in dark rooms like this, which there are like 2 or 3 of in the game. It lights up the room, I think permanently, so no real purpose to the power, honestly. It's just there probably to... I don't want to say it's there to fill a slot, but it's it's the closest thing I can think of that it fits, like, you know what I mean? Because I think it only does appear in those 2 or 3 rooms, and it doesn't even damage enemies. I mean, it's nice to have just a little power-up that's there for traversal's sake, but it feels like a bit purposeless, I guess. I don't think I want to go right here, because there are pathways like this in the game that happen once or twice that have different items in them. Generally speaking, I like to go for the 1-up instead of the Maxamato. And with that, that's all the stages cleared from Butter Building, so now we're on to the boss fight, which is going to be over really quickly. Even after I do this minigame. That's also one thing I like about this game compared to some other platformer type things. Optional minigames like this don't take too long. Because some games I'm thinking of, they can take upwards of a few minutes, whereas in this, you're lucky if they last a minute. Or unlucky. You know what I mean. But yeah, this is what it looks like when you play the game well. I am easily 2 seconds ahead of everyone, I think, at this point. Yeah, it's about 2 seconds. And for doing that, I'm going to get some extra lives. Also, to this day, I'm not certain what rate on the right side of the screen means. Maybe it's how much of the land you actually made rainbowy. Either way, it's time for the boss fight, who is going to be Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright. The way these guys works is that they alternate between who's in the sky and who's not. The one on the ground is constantly attacking you, and the one in the sky isn't. However, they will just do some attacks that cause themselves to be damaged, more or less, or shoot out stars that allow them to be damaged. Whenever one starts moving like that in the sky, they're going to outlet the attack that allows you to attack the other. As you can see, though, Cutter kinda tore them apart. Either way, with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, we'll be heading into World 4. See you guys then.